Well, we've got Kechi Osondu on the line, and we're going to talk about her book, The Light Within the Shade, Finding Solace and Meaning in Trauma and Pain of Bipolar Disorder, Depression, Mania, Anxiety, PTSD, and Other Mental Illnesses. Good afternoon, Kechi. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Toby?
Very well, thanks indeed. So, what was it that inspired you to write this book and share your story with the world?
I was really inspired because when I started having symptoms myself, I didn't know what I was having. I didn't know there was anything called depression or bipolar. And later on, talking to people who had mental illness, they felt like there was a gap that needed to be filled. They wanted a book, something to help them fill that gap. Before they sought, help from professionals or something, they wanted something from a peer to read to help them, encourage them, give them what they needed to know before they actually went out and sought professionals.
And let's talk a little bit about your own story, if we don't mind. How old were you when you were first diagnosed with your condition or conditions?
I was 29.
That's relatively young, but not completely young. So do you think your age played a part in your reaction to it?
Definitely, because I had been having the symptoms for many years, for at least a decade and a half before then. So I had suffered this and kind of white-knuckled my way through it for about 15 years before I was diagnosed and before I got any help.
And how long before the diagnosis did you realise there was something up with you, to put it that way? And also, is it something that you suddenly realise, or do you kind of slowly realise it over many years?
Yes, I slowly realized it over many years that there was something different from me and other people. And people seem to have kind of an easier way negotiating life. And I felt like I wasn't doing very well negotiating life. But my mother was good with helping me out, but she died when I was a little bit young, and it threw me off balance. That's when I started to have very major episodes and not being able to handle them myself.
And how did life change after your diagnosis? Because was it almost a relief to finally find out why you were having all these issues?
It was a huge relief to know that there was help. I could get help. But at the same time, it was also kind of sad. I cried because I felt now everybody's going to say that I'm crazy. I mean, I thought it's verified right now that I have mental illness, and it was sad for me. But at the same time, I felt, okay, now there can be help. Maybe I can find a way to live a life and kind of, even if I don't thrive, at least I can cope with my symptoms.
Yeah. And how did you deal with that stigma? Because we'd like to think otherwise, but there are still a few people in the workplace or wherever who think that if you've got a mental illness, you're somehow completely mad and ought to be in some home somewhere. So how do you deal with the stigma? And maybe for people listening as well, is there a good way to approach these people and, have a conversation with them?
Yes, actually, and there's actually, unfortunately, more than a few people who think this. It's still quite a thing that when you tell people, they have kind of a gut reaction. They think, okay, what's she gonna do next?
Yeah.
They don't really know what to expect from you. I've been in hospital, to try to change my medication, or when I've had a chronic, or like an episode and needed to have help, and the even from medical professionals, from nurses or psych techs, they still give you kind of a different reaction than when I've gone into hospital for other medical issues. There's a difference between the way you're treated by medical professionals when you go in for psych issues, and there is a way to treat it. There is a way, first of all, to tell yourself, this is a no-fault illness. Mental illness is a no-fault illness. You did not give yourself that mental illness. You're usually born with a predisposition to it, and stress or something else eventually along the line brings it out. So knowing for yourself that it's a no-fault illness is a big step towards being strong and not accepting whatever stigma that somebody else might put on you. And then in my book, I wrote quite a few ways that a person is able to deal with the stigma and to kind of educate family and friends of people who have mental illness and the general public, to let them see that there's nothing wrong with us in that sense. We're not crazy. This is an illness like diabetes or anything else that can be dealt with. The problem is that if a person isn't taking care of themselves, then there is the possibility of them acting out and then, causing the stigma to then be even worse.
Yeah, that's the thing. You say it is an illness just like diabetes and whatever, and that's true, isn't it? Mental health ought to be treated just like physical health. There's also a stigma where if you had time off work or said you couldn't do something or whatever because of your mental health, people will just think you're being lazy or you can't be bothered.
Exactly. That is sadly the case. And luckily now, like you mentioned before, there is a thing coming out now where people are getting to realize a little bit more that is not the case, that people who are mentally ill really have a genuine illness. And with COVID happening, we found that people, even medical professionals, had mental health issues as a result of the trauma that they went through with their patients dying on them. Yeah. I have a sister, for instance, who's an infectious diseases doctor, and she had patients dying on her all the time. That caused a lot of trauma for her. That was the case also with other people nurses and medical professionals who went through a lot during COVID. And they complained that they were being treated a certain way when they opened up and said, look, I need a mental health day and things like that. Yeah. But I think that opened people's eyes to the fact that mentally ill people are genuinely ill when they say that, look, I'm overwhelmed. I need time off to get a little better before I can come back and continue with my work.
Now, how do you think your book will help readers who are maybe in a similar situation to you?
I think that the fact that somebody else has been brave enough to come out and tell the truth so openly, I was very, very clear. And the book is kind of raw in the way that I tell the truth about myself. Already, I put the book out there on Amazon and I got quite a few people who responded. I was very amazed with the way the reviews went from people who I don't know who have mental illness, who were brave enough to say what they thought about the book. I have also met other people just organically who I spoke to about the book, and they said that the book has helped them in quite a good way to be open about their illness, to feel better about it, and some to seek help. Some people who did not want to seek help just because they felt that they don't want the stigma. I would rather suffer through it than let myself be labeled as mentally ill.
And do you think that the book will help readers be more aware of their condition? Because maybe they haven't been diagnosed with anything yet and they haven't put a name to it yet.
Yes, because for instance, when I had no idea what I had, I read a book called The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. She's a very popular writer and poet who unfortunately committed suicide at some point of her life. When I read her book, the first time I read it, I thought whatever it is this woman had, this is what I have. I didn't know what the name of it was, but reading that book helped me a whole lot. I know that reading my book would open the eyes of a lot of people who don't know what they have, but who can read it and say, these are the symptoms that I experience. Whatever this lady has, this is similar to my experience.
Yeah. And if you think you have what somebody in a book has or what somebody's written has, I take it you should ought to see a doctor or healthcare professional rather than just diagnosing yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Diagnosing yourself is just the first step to then seeking help, because I advise in my book, you can't do it alone. It's a very, very dangerous thing to to sit back, because it's an illness that can result in death, very sadly, which many times does result in death. So that comes with even people who are being treated, not to talk of people who are going it themselves and trying to white knuckle through it.
Yeah.
So I advise very strongly in the book, find competent health professionals to help you deal with it. And you'll be like so much happier. Find that you can actually deal with the illness and be so much happier.
And how do you think the book differs from all the other self-help books that are out there and people are buying but maybe don't always work?
Right. The thing that is different is perhaps how raw I let the book be, how open I was with sharing things that are very embarrassing, and other people are perhaps not quite as willing to be that clear. It's also a book written by an African. There isn't another written by an African like me, where in Africa the stigma is horrible. I complain about the stigma. I live in America, but the stigma in Africa is even much more so. There's another book that I saw that was written by a Nigerian, but she was raised in the United States. I was raised in Africa. The difference is amazingly great. That is there's a huge difference there in, the way we were raised and what I went through in Nigeria as a result of my illness, not wanting to say anything. Yeah, that's a huge difference. There's also the difference with, I put in there a spiritual aspect. Some people find that a lot of people actually find that it makes a difference. I saw a psychologist who was the head of a huge hospital in Manhattan, where after 9/11, a lot of the people who had been in the Twin Towers, where they went for their treatment, she spoke about how people had to believe in something, didn't matter what, but they had to have a belief in a higher power to be helped. And that those who had no such belief in anything at all could not be helped. I was amazed at that. But I found that that being the case, I put in the truth about what has helped me, that there had to be some kind of a spiritual aspect, some belief in something higher and bigger than yourself, because by ourselves, we're not able to help ourselves completely. Yeah. And that is just the simple.
Why do you think it is that in Africa there's even more stigma? And is this something that could change?
The thing with Africa, unfortunately, is just because we're not as advanced medically just yet. And because of that, people who are mentally ill many times do not get the care they need. And as a result, many become psychotic and lose touch with reality, and you find them on the streets. So when you hear mental illness in Africa, many times you instantly compare it with, or what you see with mental illness in Africa is automatically psychosis. Here in the US, for instance, or in the Western world, you hear mental illness and you think of depression, and you still see a person who's functioning normally. So the stigma back in Africa is psychosis. Oh, the person is crazy. They're on the streets. Yeah. They're not, they're completely not in touch with reality. They're stark raving bunkers, and that's what we see. But it's getting better. What the awareness is improving. The medications are getting better. The doctors are getting better. It's definitely going to be better. Unfortunately, not yet, but it will be better.
And why are you so hopeful that it will get better? Have you seen it slowly get better over time?
Yes, there is unfortunately, I don't have the name of the group, but there is a group. Before there was nothing like that, like a suicide hotline now present, for instance, in Nigeria, that never was there before, that is present in practically all the states of the country. And mental health in general is a lot more advanced. The number of doctors available, the amount of training, available and ready in the country is much more far gone than when I was living there. And it wasn't available available in many states of the Federation, but it is available right now. And just the fact that it's there creates awareness, and people are able to go there and get better. So that in itself is a huge, huge plus.
And how important would you say mental health awareness is to you?
It's hugely important. I have seen people suffer. I have seen people die, unfortunately. I have been in hospital quite a few times just because I wasn't helped, if you put it that way, by certain family members. When I didn't have people I could rely on at some point. I was in hospital a lot, and my heart was broken by people who I saw in hospital who were going through things, and just out in the street, homeless people. A lot of homeless people have mental health issues. That's why they're out there. They're not able to hold down jobs and things like that. And I have a huge, huge heart for mental health awareness, letting people know what's going on, helping, people who can do something about it know what's going on, and then trying to do whatever it is that I can for people who are mentally ill. I have plans for the future that are already in progress. To see what I can do to help in my own way.
And speaking of plans for the future, do you plan on writing a second book tackling the same issues?
Yes, I do. I do plan to write a second book. There's a lot that I left out in the first book. I wrote the first book with a lot of pain and trauma. It took me a long time to write that book. I was asked to write that book many times by many of my doctors, my psychologists. They told me, Kechi, you have a deep insight into your illness. You have a great awareness of your illness. You can write a book that will help many, many people. We have many patients who are not able to express themselves as well as you can. That your book will help a lot of people. And so I started writing, but I would have a lot of pain, and then I would not be able to continue. So it took me a long, long time to write that book. But after I had finished, it was very cathartic.
Yeah.
And I was able to, really breathe a sigh of relief. But I left a lot of good things out of that book. So I'm going to definitely write a second one.
And do you think the second time round it's going to be a little bit easier?
I think definitely it will, yes.
And the stuff that you left out of the first book, is it kind of all in random places? Like, I don't know if the stuff you wrote about was in chronological order or not, but is it kind of events that would need to be in order again, or how does it work?
It's going to be a lot of it. A lot of it is going to be in order, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what else is coming up for you after this second book? Are there even more plans? And you kind of hinted about mental health awareness things that you're working on, aren't you?
Yes. I belong to a group called Fountain House that is a psychosocial club that makes it easy for mentally ill people to kind of help themselves get better. There's a lot going on in that place that I can draw from to help people. I also have in my mind a plan for coaching, because I have learned so much about myself and about other people that I feel that I can be of use to people who are still starting out on their mental health journey and kind of don't know what they're doing. I remember starting out not taking my meds on time, not doing a lot of healthy things that I should have done to make myself healthier.
Yeah.
I have a couple of partners who are happy to start me on a coaching journey to help people who are just starting out and kind of feel lost and don't know what to do with themselves. So coaching is a big, big thing that I'm going to be doing.
In the meantime, where are we able to find this book, which is out now, The Light Within the Shade? Definitely
on Amazon, and in a couple of weeks in local bookstores like Barnes & Noble.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great to have you on, and good luck with the future books and everything that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Toby. Thank you for having me.